host, John Keene. As always, I would like to thank you guys for joining me. Such you please add, follow, check us out. Instagram, Facebook, Best Damn Podcast, Twitter, The Real Best Damn. Please make sure to hit the like, give us a thumbs up, share this link, help me to get it out there. That's how new people find me. If you would like to join us over on Patreon, donate, support to the channel, all the links are in the description box below. And if you're in the chat, just let me know if you guys can hear me and see me, if everything is coming in clearly. Hopefully we get some more people in here. Tonight we've got a pretty interesting one. I decided to do this one a little bit different. So we're going to be talking about the mirror of consciousness. Now, just to kind of give you like a little bit of information on, and I'm sure anybody that's ever, and hopefully I get a message here letting me know that you guys can hear me or see me. Hopefully we're coming in clear. But with the mirror of consciousness, it's like, and kind of look at some of my older videos if you just want to get some more background information on, how everything works. But essentially what we're dealing with is a reality where we are operating from a higher state of being, right? Our physical presence is not where the seat of power actually lies within this reality. It actually takes place in a whole nother dimension, a whole nother level. So when you hear people, thank you, I appreciate that. So when you see people talking about, the higher self, the collective consciousness, God, any type of higher spiritual entity, that's what they're referring to. You see a lot of people refer to, because it's really trendy now, like 5D ascension and all of that ascension stuff. You don't have to ascend at all. You're actually already an ascended being. You're already descended from the gods. Now, if you kind of look at the history or the mythos, all across the world, I think it's very obvious that humanity has forgotten its origin story. We've forgotten where we've come from. We've forgotten our history, and it would seem, if you look at a lot of the different mythologies and the ancient and spiritual text, that someone, whether this be interdimensional entities or just flat out alien species, right, have conquered us, at a time in the past. And if we look at, and I'm going to take it back to the oldest one that we really have, and that is the ancient Sumerian epic. And if we look at the ancient Sumerian epic, we can see the story of these gods, right? Starting Anu being the ruling god and his two sons. And any creation epic that we have talks about these two sons, these two brothers, right? Enlil and Enki, right? Enlil being the Lord Commander, the ruler of the earth. Enki being kind of like the creator god, the one that actually brought humanity into fruition during these epics. But what you'll also know during these epics, that these gods, when they came to Earth, they came from another place, a planet that they called Nibiru, or Planet X. Planet X, planet of the crossing, we're going to get into the symbolism of that and what it actually means as we kind of move further in this, and what all of this really means for us. What we're seeing now is, and you'll notice that the Bible too says that there is nothing new under the sun, meaning that everything has a cyclical nature, and you can see this in our reality. You can see this, from the way that the sun, the earth, the planets, everything has an orbit, right? It operates, all the planets are spherical, unless you're a flat earther, right? Everything has a spherical orbital nature, meaning that it's cycling around, right? Everything is on a track. Everything comes, goes, and returns to the same place that it once was. And we are no different than this, right? Matter of fact, if you look at a lot of the ancient mythologies, what they're actually doing through a form of what I like to call quantum symbolism is they're connecting to the collective unconscious or our subconscious, and it allows us on a subconscious level to reconnect to these ancient archetypes, to these ancient stories. That way we ourselves, we have the ability to inhabit that character, right? That archetype, to play out that story in our own lives. And what a lot of magical rites and rituals are trying to do is the same exact thing. They're trying to mimic these ancient rites and rituals that the gods were actually playing out on the world stage when they were conquering humanity. And I do believe that we were conquered. And that is, in fact, why we don't remember our history. That is, in fact, why we don't know where we come from. That is, in fact, so many reasons why humanity only accesses 10% of the brain. Humanity only can see 0.00001% of the electromagnetic light spectrum, meaning we're fucking blind to the totality of the universe. And meaning, why our telomeres have been shortened and we only exist for no more than 120 years. I feel like all of these things were alterations that happened after we were conquered, right? And you hear a lot of epics and tales that talk about the fall of Atlantis, Sumerian tales, ancient Egypt, and all of this time where these gods ruled. And they had a king's list even, right? A lineage, if you will, on how they passed down this power from one person to another. And you even heard in the Bible and biblical tales, it talks about how the Nephilim or the fallen, they were mating, reproducing, with the daughters of men, right? And I believe that this was to put their genetics, put their code, put their essence within humanity. That way, spiritually, consciously, they could still rule the human race, right, from afar, from an overall encompassing energy. And you see this kind of start too, like when you look back all over the world, different tribes, different nations, different cultures, all worshiping different types of gods. Matter of fact, we don't have the history anymore. We don't really know how any of this stuff was built. But if we look at like the monoliths, obelisks, the pyramids, all of these ancient structures, not only do they appear to be incredibly technologically advanced, right? They all are on energetic lines, right? Ley lines of the earth that harness specific energies, right? And if you look at each of these energies, you go back to ancient Egypt, and they were connected to Orion, right? You go back to, I got a few of them here. I'm getting to my notes. But you go back to these different places in Earth, these different times, these different cultures, they were connected to different star clusters, right? And they had obelisks, they had pyramids, they had different monoliths that were erected that acted as sort of spiritual or conscious antennas to be able to connect to that energy of the God that they worshipped, right? So at one point in time, it would appear as if humanity not only we were like gods, and you can see this, right? When you look at a lot of the mythologies as well, they'll talk about at one time humanity walked with the gods, meaning we had that celestial knowledge, that interstellar cosmic knowledge, right? We also had that knowledge. It just, it just wasn't reserved for the gods. But then you hear about, Planet X, this planet of the crossing, Nibiru, right? And many people today, because we're at such a low state of consciousness, and I'll tell you why I believe this too. We've also heard in the Bible and many other tales about this conscious fall, right? Lucifer, the fallen angels, a third of the angels falling. I believe this is us, right? Humanity. This is us taking a conscious dip. Right, a dip in consciousness. This is when the governors got put on, and we were only able to access 10% of our brains. We were only able to access a small sliver of the electromagnetic light spectrum. We were only able to access a small piece of our telomeres, and our lives got cut short, so on and so forth. We lost our knowledge, we lost our history, we lost all of these things after we were conquered. And the Sumerian texts actually tell of this story of us being conquered. It was the destruction of Tiamat. Now, many people believe, and if you look at it too, between Jupiter and Mars, there's what's called the hammer bracelet or the asteroid belt. It looks like the remnants of a planet, right? Of a planet. And if you hear of the Sumerian text, and they talk about the story of Tiamat as well, and how Kinu basically is like the moon, right? So that right there is a dead giveaway that the earth was actually a piece of Tiamat, right? And that Kinu is being our modern day moon. And if you look at the moon, you can tell also that there's no way that that was put there naturally. Matter of fact, the way that it aligns on eclipses and everything like that, within a fraction of an inch, there's no possible way that it was put there by mistake. The placement of the moon and its tidal lock and all of that, right? It's been artificially placed there, and artificial isn't a good word. It's been placed there intentionally by someone or something that's far more technologically advanced than we are. Right. And in that tale of the Anunnaki, you hear about the rise or the ascension of Marduk, right? Now, Marduk is the son of Enlil or Enki, of these two brothers. Now, Enki's original name was Ea, meaning Lord of the Water, and then he changed his name to Enki, meaning Lord of the Earth, right? So right there kind of tells you that there are two chapters in humanity as well, that at one point in time, if we look at a lot of these ancient stories, they talk about at one point in time, there was no sky even, right? That the waters of the firmament were actually connected to the waters of the earth. And in the Gnostic text, it talks about the separation of the waters above the firmament and the waters below, meaning that an artificial dome or shield or something like that, to that effect, that we call the sky. And notice Marduk is the sky god. He's also Ra. He's also all these Jesus. He's also all of these other different gods, right? Jupiter. That this was placed right here, that there was a separation that was placed, and that when Nibiru, or Planet X, planet of the crossing, right, the cross, and if you look at all of modern day symbolism, from Christianity to a million other religions, right, the cross it's very important, right, and then the Planet X, right, this crossing, this separation. The cross also represents humanity as well. It represents the physical. Notice that we are binary as well in nature, right? We operate off fight or flight, ones and zeros, left and right brain, masculine, feminine. We have been crossed as well. We have been separated. And if you look at the first book of Adam and Eve, it talks about at one point in time, humanity's nature was androgyne in nature, meaning that we had both masculine and feminine embodied within ourselves, right? And we still do to a certain extent, or to a certain degree, but not quite like we had, in that pre-time before we were conquered, before the landing of the two brothers, before, the planet of the crossing, Planet X. Now, in this tale of the Sumerians, Enki, and he is the older brother. He's the brother of creation. He is the one who genetically alters mankind. He took the hominid species that was actually on Earth already, and many people believe that it would probably be something akin to Neanderthal, right? And this species didn't even have a language, right? They had no ability to talk. And if you think about the Tower of Babel and the confusion of language and all of this, was this actually us being given the ability to talk, right? And remember in the Bible too, it talks about how the tongue has the power of life and death, right? It can bless you and it can curse you. It's our words that actually, give power to a lot of the things that we manifest and attract into our lives, right? Whether it's good or bad. And most people have no conscious direction or intention in the words that they use at all anyways, right? They're not even aware of the power of words and how powerful they can be and how they can be used to either, ensnare people, or set people free, right? So the cross symbolism, it actually goes back to the time when Earth was conquered, and this is Marduk's symbol, right? Marduk, he has the cross or the axe, right? And like I said, the Planet X, which is Nibiru, which was allegedly what hit the Earth, what broke Tiamat into pieces. And if you look at these ancient epics of the Anunnaki as well, it talks about how the sky opened up right? When Nibiru crossed, and that's what allowed the waters of the heavens to pour in and flood the earth and the deluge. And notice that in the time before the deluge, that mankind was walking with the gods. This was the time when mankind was walking with the gods, right? And the Bible will tell you that we were evil, we were sinful, we were fucked up, the giants were devouring us and all these things, and that it was an act of mercy, right? That we were destroyed, basically, And if you really kind of look at it, it doesn't really appear that way. Because even in the epics of the Sumerians, Noah, which his name would be Veasudra in these texts, he was a descendant of them as well. It looks like what they were actually doing was wiping out the original humans and then replacing them with the ones that have been genetically altered by them, the ones that had their genes in them. And these would be, those that have like the Draco reptilian brain. Now, the difference between what we call like reptilian, and that's how we are. We're two parts. Remember, we're binary. So we have that mammalian side of our brain. We have the mammalian side of our brain, and we have the reptilian side of our brain. We have the masculine, we have the feminine, so on and so forth. And our entire reality is built like this, right? And if you think about the reptilian and why it's so powerful and why it's able to achieve such great things on the earth, it's because of the lack of empathy, right? It's the lack of empathy. And think about the whole, and if you look at symbolism, secret societies, all of this, right? It's order out of chaos, right? And the reason it's order out of chaos, because chaos, if you're an emotional, empathetic being like humans are, most humans, and this is why most people can't believe a lot of the things that are taking place on the earth. They're like, there's no such thing as a new world order. There's no such thing as secret societies. There's no such thing as this and this and this. And the reason they don't believe that the governments of the world do these things and all of this is because they themselves wouldn't do these things, right? Why? Because they're built different, right? They're more mammalian centered. They have that bigger emotional capacity. That's why we nurture our young. That's why we have a sense of social, we're a very social species. That's why we are very community oriented and all of this. We want to protect and nurture and take care of one another. Now we are getting away from that as time kind of progresses. But naturally, I feel like most of us were born inherently that way, right? To where we're very emotionally centered and emotionally based. And if you think about, and even the Gnostics talked about this too, how, the demiurge is what they called it. It exploited us by our emotions, right? And you can think of psychic vampires or anything like, there's a million different ways that people have talked about these things. And a million different ways that people have tried to explain this, but these entities that are, reptilian or have that lizard brain or more lizard nature, that cold-blooded aspect in them, and they're more directed and driven by that. They don't have that empathy, right? They don't have that empathy. They're not driven by emotion. They feed off of emotion. They exploit the fact that the masses, the population, you, me, all of us, right? We are driven by our emotions, right? And that's why you see the media, the news, everything is always like this play on your emotions. Think about, all of the false flag events and crisis and all of these things that have happened, just in your lifetime alone, not to mention, way before that. It's always this play on your emotions. And you can take this to the war on terror, the war on drugs, the war on COVID, so on and so forth. It's always this ploy to tap into your feels and get you to feel like a bad person, get you to feel guilt, shame, empathy, some type of emotional exploitation to get you to go along with the agenda. And this is also how they start grassroots movements as well, and how they get you to sacrifice yourself for a lot of these agendas that they have as well. It's like, whether it's you joining a political party, you going off to war, sending your children off to war, or any other grassroots movement that you've seen that are not grassroots at all, right? But, they call them that. It's all an emotional exploitation. It's right, your sense of patriotism, or like you're riled up and for justice for somebody that's been wronged or hurt, or you want to defend some cause because you've been emotionally pulled into the cause, right? And that's how the reptilian brain works. That's how the reptilians work, right? And that's how these entities operate. Right, they're not built the same as you and I, and if you think about these gods, and think about just any any god or mythology that you've heard of, or any book that you've read throughout time, right? A lot of these gods, they don't have the same thinking as you and me, right? They can reward or punish you just the same, right? They'll tell you to go kill an entire people and not think twice about it. Why do you think that is, right? Because a lot of the different peoples in the tribes that we were seeing back, especially in the Bible and stuff like that, they were associated with Marduk. And this was the conquering of humanity, of them wiping out the descendants of those that worshipped other gods or other energies. Now you can't find another energy really on the planet. Matter of fact, it looks like all of the history of the planet has been wiped out before the conquering of Marduk. Right? Before that time, you really can't find much, before that. And that's why nobody knows, who built the pyramids. Nobody knows, any of these tales. Yeah, Anchor Wat, right? It's connected to the Draco constellation. So it's like each part of the earth, they erected these different monuments, right? These different obelisks, these different pyramids, and they were on specific energy grids of the earth to harness conscious energy, and that obelisk was erected to connect to the stars, right? Because the stars give off astrological energy, and that's why in specific times, if we have an astrological alignment taking place right now, we have 6 planets right now, I think, that are in astrological alignment. Mercury is soon to join them, making all 7 planets in alignment. A lot of these times, this is when you would see things like the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail. A lot of these things came into conception during astrological alignments. Even think about the Star of Bethlehem and Jesus. That was an astrological alignment, because the one undeniable thing is that during these specific times where there are specific celestial alignments, there are more energies that are available, right? And whether you think astrology is, woo-woo or, whatever, I do believe that's how a lot of these things were created and brought into fruition. A lot of these, Holy Grails, Ark of the Covenants, they took place during specific astrological alignments. One of the more recent ones, the Great Sign in Heaven, right? Back in 2017. That was a major astrological alignment. It was prophesied. It was put into the book of Revelation and a lot of other books, right? That talked about the constellation of Virgo, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, right? All of these planets coming into a specific alignment that allowed for this portal or this opening of a specific time on planet Earth, right? And it doesn't change. There's nothing new under the sun. Right, and it is all mirrors being reflected back to us. So essentially the physical reality, that's what this reality is. When you look into the book of Genesis and it talks about how we're that phantom, that projection, that illusion, that, and we're narcissists, right? We're looking at our own reflection in the waters, right? We're falling in love with our own reflection. And if you look at, Divine Pymander of Hermes Trismegistus, it talks about that's what God did was, and we in essence are God, right? That's where our spiritual essence comes from, right? God has fallen in love with his own image, right? That's why we are the children of God. We are the image of God. We are the projection, the mirrored image of God. Everything taking place, in the conscious reality first. And think about, too, the book of Enoch. Think about a lot of these books, these texts that have been removed from the original canon, the apocryphal texts, all of this from the Bible, they don't want you seeing anymore, right? Why is that? the book of Enoch, it outlines the 200 watchers. It talks about how each one of these celestial beings were responsible for specific things, right? Like metallurgy, medicine, so on and so forth, right? Because you might start to understand that each one of these astrological energies does correlate to specific things, right? And you might start to harness those powers, right? And like I said, when it talks about how the gods were mating with mankind, right? This is what's happened. And this is where you get like the 12 powerful families and all of this shit, right? These were the families, I believe, that were more genetically predisposed, I guess, to be able to connect to that reptilian energy. And they do say that they have certain traits as well. Those that are more predisposed to the reptilian energy have like the elongated skulls, the Habsburg jaws, just different things about them that are these reptilian traits. Now, whether that's true or false, I don't know. But if you look at a lot of these families, they do have this. And I want you to think too, because Yahweh is in fact Marduk, right? And think about how it was, this very angry, wrathful, vengeful God that was talking about no gods before me, right? He's putting no gods before me, right? Meaning he was erasing all this history of these other gods because at the time before the crossing, before Planet X, it was a time where, and if we look at the different mythologies and mythos and all of that, it talks about how, we were descendants of the gods, that the gods were creating offspring, and that, all of these different gods were actually worshipped. All of these different energies were actually being embodied by different parts of humanity, right? And some cultures, some parts of, civilization may embody one energy, and some parts of the world may embody another part of the energy. But after the conquering, right, it was monotheism. It was only one God, right? No God before me. And that was that patriarchal God that we see, the more warlike God, the wrathful, angry, vengeful God, Marduk, the ram, the bull, right? So on and so forth. We all know that once this God happens, right? And this is when Moses goes up on Mount Sinai, right? Talks to the burning bush, right? He comes down, they're worshiping the golden calf, all of these different things. This is where you get the sacrifice. This is where you get all of this, because the story of Marduk is a story of sacrifice, right? He is the sun god that was sacrificed. And this is where we get Jesus. This is where we get Mithraism and all of this. Notice not one fucking religion, not one surviving story on planet Earth deviates from that narrative. Not one. I don't care how you interpret it, how you look at it, how you remix it or what, you're going to still get the same story kind of repeated over and over and over, different variations of the story, because it looks like when they confuse the language, what they did with confusing the language, and maybe the confusion of language was verbal language. I said that a little bit earlier. I'm not sure if that's the truth or not, but it's something I believe every culture, and I would challenge anybody, prove me wrong on that one. I've been studying this stuff for over a decade, and I've yet to find one creation myth, one spiritual text, one anything that deviates from that same story. One version or another. And it might be a slightly different variation, and I don't care if that offends you or not. The truth is the truth, right? It's like, I'm not here to tickle your ears. I'm just here to tell you, what I believe, and you can take it or leave it. But we do know that, that there probably was different understandings of the universe. There probably was different understandings of creation. There probably was a lot of different ways of perceiving the world before, we were conquered, before the ascension of Marduk, right? And Marduk, if you look at that, the epic of Sumeria, right? He was the son of those gods that was left behind, right? He was the son of the gods that was left behind. He was the commander of the Ajiji, right? And a lot of people correlate the Ajiji to the Greys, right? The gray aliens. I don't know if that's true or not, but a lot of people, they do. as they were the original slave race before humanity, according to the Sumerians. Because according to the Sumerians, they had revolted against the gods because the burden was too hard for them, right? The burden was too hard for them. So then they genetically altered, Marduk's dad, Enki, genetically altered humanity, and we were made the slave race, right? To mine gold, right? And if we know the spiritual meaning of gold, it's spirit, it's soul force, it's energy, right? So we were literally mining our souls. That's what we were doing. That's the slavery. I don't believe we were actually digging in the fucking dirt, building pyramids and shit like that. I believe it was them being able to exploit us emotionally and energetically to suck the fucking loosh or suck the souls right out of us. And we still see that today. And think about these gods. They were giants, right? They were super imposing, massive, all powerful, all knowing entities. Now imagine that, to, a species that has been conquered, it's trauma bonding, like we're worshiping them because we're afraid, because if, once you've been conquered, you've been defeated, you've had your ass busted, they've erased your memory, they've shortened your lifespan, they've blinded you. They didn't just do it to you, they did it to the entire fucking planet, right? And they altered you, right? And a lot of us were born into the bondage. So like we have no clue that we were ever slaves or ever anything great to begin with. Now imagine how worship comes along, right? You have no choice, right? It's like if you don't worship, it's every knee will bow, right? Every tongue will confess. You see the same kind of premise in all of the spiritual texts too, to where it's like, bow down, right? And the lineage of the kings was, and that's why I believe all of this, based on lineage is based on genetics, right? It's because it was their sons, their daughters, right? Those that were genetically predisposed to that energy, right? They were enabled to be inhabited by that conscious energy and by those spiritual entities, right? Because I don't believe that all of these entities were actually fully physical. As a matter of fact, I believe that if you are from a higher dimensional space, and think about it, if we're here in the 3D, right, and we are a shadow, that means the 3D is a shadow of a 4-dimensional being. So we're actually in a higher dimension than where we're existing now. This is just your shadow on the wall here, right? It's a 2D shadow of a 3D being. So if you are a projection of a spiritual being, that means you're actually already in a higher dimension, a higher place, a 4D, 5D, right, type of dimension. So you have to imagine that the gods that trapped you in this dimension are at a way higher place than even that. Meaning that they could inhabit, and if you can inhabit multiple dimensions and multiple aspects at the same time, like right now, I'm in the 5D consciously, I'm in the 3D physically, the 2D shadow, so I'm in multiple dimensions at one time as I'm speaking to you in this very moment right now. So imagine these gods that have all of this technology. They were so powerful that they could fly a fucking planet into another planet to split it in half. They could genetically alter entire species and make them submit, right? To have their brains in conflict with one another, right? To have them be two pieces of a whole. That way they had to reproduce and do things in a different type of way in order to progress their species, to shorten their lifespan. That way they couldn't accumulate large amounts of knowledge, to blind them to the whole of reality. That way they couldn't see and interpret all the things that were taking place. Now imagine the dimensions of consciousness that they're actually existing in, right? So just because they were here on the physical realm with us, it doesn't mean that that's where they were actually existing at. It means they had an avatar or something like that, just like you have now. We could have been seeing a shadow of them from a 70, 90, whatever, right? Dimensional space is what I'm saying, right? So even though their physical body may have perished or their physical body may have left, here's how, that works. If I have access to the 5D, then I have access to every dimension underneath that as well, right? So I can also see 4D, 3D, 2D, 1D, right? But if I'm a 10D, but I can't see the dimensions above that, right? So I can't see 7D, I can't see those things. I'm blind to that, right? Because I'm limited by my conscious, where I reside, right? So if I'm a 5D being, that's the highest I go, unless I grow and expand and evolve, into the future. But where I'm currently at, I can only see below, and where I'm at, I can't see past that. So if they're above that, right, no matter if they're here physically or not, they can actually see everything that's going on. And if you see, kind of what the firmament even looks like, doesn't it almost look like like a palantir, like a crystal ball? To where it's like almost like if it was some type of interdimensional entity, they would almost be able to like look down and like see everything as a whole and have like a bird's eye view of what's taking place at this lower, conscious dimension. And that's what I'm saying. If they were not even physically inhabited, it doesn't mean they still couldn't be here, because they can inhabit every dimension beneath them at the same time, right? And if we're giving reverence and giving worship to them, and if we think about what language is, right? And we know that the Bible says, and I'm not trying to knock any specific religion or anything like that, but the truth of the matter is that I do believe, the Bible, it does come from the Sumerian text. A lot of that is what's put us into bondage. A lot of that is what's put us into bondage. And a lot of those tales, dude, they come from, the epics of Gilgamesh and, Enki's world order and all of that, right? All of these Sumerian tales. Our language, that's the ability to be conscious, is what they say, the ability to communicate with the higher self. But if you really think about it, we wouldn't even need the ability of language whatsoever if we were actually embodied within our original form, right? We only need language because we are disconnected from our conscious self, right? Because we're blind to what's taking place in the conscious realm, right? That's the only reason we need language at all, right? And language, all it is it's frequency or vibration or frequency. And we know that every frequency has energetic archetypes with it. That's why symbolism is so powerful, right? And words are the attempt to divide energies, right, into parts and pieces and separate them in order to express them, through language. And that language is what allows us to communicate with our mind and our higher self and one another. So I'm just saying, at one point in time, I don't believe we had language at all. And that's, why, the guttural sounds, I believe is like our original heart language or love language. And if you think about, Neanderthal, which, there's no connection, and this is just scientifically, there's no connection between Neanderthal and Chrono-Magnus. And I wonder why. Was it because Neanderthal, without language, was the original human species, right? To where we didn't even need language. We consciously communicated. We didn't use pictograms. We didn't use shit. Why? Were we really just that stupid? Were we really just that dumb? We had flat teeth. We didn't eat meat. We were just very, very, very fucking different, right? Very different. And then all of a sudden we get canines, right? Like Sirius, the dog star and all this, we get canines because he's dog gods, right? And God and dog, think about it, it's inverted, right? So we get canines, and then Chrono-Magnus, we're able to now speak now with language as well. It's like there's some sort of alteration that takes place. And then also, if you look at like the telomeres within our body, it looks like they were literally soldered. Like somebody had taken the telomeres, which is what gives us the ability to regenerate. And we can live fucking forever if they weren't altered. they've now been shortened, and then the Bible says that, and this is Enlil that was saying this, and remember, Marduk is like the new Enlil, right? He takes the place of Enlil. He ascends to the highest place of the stars and takes the place of Enlil, which was the Lord Commander of the earth. And he was a war god as well. So if you think about it, right, he says, my spirit shall not abide in mankind forever, right? No more than 120 years. And then you look at our telomeres, and guess what? No more than 120 years. That's why nobody really lives. I mean, I'm sure there's been a few people to outlive that, but not very many, right? Because we can't regenerate no more. And if you look at pre-flood, right, like Noah or Vasudra, Methuselah, all of these different, people, they were able to live 800 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, right? Fucking Abraham's life didn't even start till he was like in his 70s or 80s, Now imagine that. Imagine, and remember, he was the one too, the ram in the thicket, which, Abraham with the ram in the thicket, this is Baphomet, right? This is also Marduk as well, So if you look at all of the secret societies and the worship of Baphomet and all of this, this is where all that comes from, right? And what did he promise Abraham? What did God promise Abraham? That his descendants would be equivalent to the number of the stars, right? Right? And if we actually descend from the stars, right? If conscious energy comes from the stars first in a fifth dimensional space, through that firmament, through that, and I've talked about this basically ad nauseum on this channel, how the governors, the rulers of the reality are the 7 main planets, right? Which these are the deities, the gods, right? They rule the days of the week. That's why 7 is the number of the soul. That's why there's 7 chakras, 7 colors of the rainbow, so on and so forth. These are the 7 main planets. And outside of the rule of Saturn is Neptune and Uranus, which represent the dream world, the astral, and all of that, right? Outside of the bounds of the physical reality, right? And on the North Pole of Saturn is the hexagon, right? The hex, the X, once again, right? And notice the rule of Saturn was also known as the Golden Age, right? This was the Golden Age. Matter of fact, if you look at a lot of the tales too, of Prometheus, this light bearer, and, the punishment of man, the punishment of Prometheus for giving us that fire, for giving us that spark, that divine spark. There was something that took place where mankind at one point had, a crazy, ability to consciously perceive the world, and we were able to communicate and interact with the gods. We were able to do things that we can no longer do. And I've spoken about this. If you even look at like the pyramids and the Vimanas and all of this shit all across the world, they all mimic like super, super advanced technology. I mean, most people, it's starting to become more common knowledge now because like ancient astronaut theories and shit like that. But I mean, truly, the shit it's mind-blowing knowledge. These 4-sided pyramids are actually conductive to ferrofluid and magnetism, and what harness hydrogen, which is water, right? And we're made up of water. The earth is made up of water. These people knew what the fuck they were doing, right? These Buddhist temples, and how the top of the temple actually represents, the same radars that we have on stealth bombers, on the tips of stealth bombers. It's like we're actually taking the technology from the ancients. It's not like we're coming up with it. And the Bible even says there's nothing new under the sun, right? And remember, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, right? This word, this language, right? And in Genesis 2, and I pointed this out, it may have been the last one that I did, or one or two before that. How if we look at like the language in Genesis, it's actually talking about how the earth was desolated and destroyed. Right? So most people just automatically assume that when they're reading the book of Genesis, that we're talking about the very first rendition of the earth. Fuck no. Fuck no. It's definitely not the first time the Earth was inhabited. It's definitely not the first time humankind was here. I don't think so at all. And if you even look at the language, it says that it was desolated, destroyed. All that's in the language. When it was talking about it was void and dark and all of that. That's what that language actually means if you take it back to the Hebrew, right? So if you look at this, it's like it's telling you in the book, and I hate to tell you, religion is never going to tell you that because that is an exoteric understanding of things, right? So it's always going to be on the external point of view, right? An external understanding of how things work. You're never going to get an esoteric understanding by going to church. I hate to tell you that, and people can be mad at that if they want. It's neither here nor there. It's just the way that it is. They themselves don't have the esoteric understanding. That's why, those that are initiated into the mysteries, right? And the mysteries are essentially, they are the matrix code, right? It's numerical, it's mathematical, because if you have the numbers are what is equivalent to the code of the matrix, because we do live in what seems to be some sort of, projection or simulation or, computer simulation. Who knows what the fuck it is, because the technology that they had was so advanced, right? I really don't rule out anything, just to be honest. I don't rule out anything. And if you see the way that the reality works, it's almost like we live in a reality a copy of a reality based on actual reality. So we live in like say I have a room here, right? And in this room, in the corner is a fish tank, right? So the fish tank still exists in the room, right? But I have paper and stuff around the fish tank to give it like a cool little background and, all of this shit. The fish never know that they don't live outside of the tank, right? That there's even anything outside the tank. They can see it, right? But it's not a part of their world. It's not a part of their reality. They can't get out of the tank and breathe. They can't get out of the tank and walk around. They can't experience none of that. But yet, outside of that tank still influences the inside of that tank, right? If it gets cold in the room, it gets cold in the tank. If it gets hot in the room, it gets hot in the tank, right? So, it still has an effect on what's going on inside of the tank, but at the same time, the fish inside of the tank are separated from what's going on outside. And I feel like that, in essence, is what Earth is and what is happening with humanity. So when people talk about disclosure, and they talk about, the aliens and all of this, it's like, if you really, really take a look at what's happened here, and if you really take a look at the history, you will never get true disclosure. Do you know why? Because you would find out that you was already enslaved fucking probably tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years ago. So why would there be any motivation to tell you outside of that? That's why we always get the woo-woo fucking bullshit version of extraterrestrials. We never get anything based on factual, solid reality when it comes to ETs, right? We always get that fake ass War of the Worlds fucking Zeta talk, bullshit version of it, right? And why is that? Because it's a fable. It's like, it's a way of them telling you, it's real, but giving it to you in such a fictional way that it can never be founded in reality, that you can never prove it, that it's never gonna change anything, right? Ever, When the truth of the matter is, if you look at, the 12 most powerful families, all of this, like even down to their names, like Rothschild, meaning red shield, right? It's from Saturn, right? Like they're harnessing the energy of Saturn, which was the god of this world. Satan, Saturn, Hasatan, Hillel, Lucifer, so on and so forth, right? Marduk are embodying these fucking energies, right? These families, because these were the gods that they were worshiping. These are part of the lineage that they embody. That's why they control the banking systems, and they have no remorse. They have no emotional empathy, because they have that reptilian mind frame. They have that reptilian brain, that reptilian dominant trait. That's why it's order out of chaos. Because if you ever notice, like a reptile, without those emotions. You put a lamb, an antelope, any type of mammal in a chaotic situation, they panic and they freak the fuck out, right? They're shaking and everything. You can't even show a sheep or a lamb the knife before you kill it because it'll sour its blood, right? It'll ruin the sacrifice, right? And notice that's the same thing that happens to you, right? You get walked to the slaughter almost every day of your life and you're unaware of it. They never show you the knife, right? Now think about, a monitor or, a fucking Komodo dragon or something like that, right? When the attack is on, when the fight is on, they're cool as a cucumber, dude. They excel in that because they don't have that emotions. They're not flipping out about anything, They don't have no compassion for their young, right? It's all about self-survival, service to self, right? And them furthering themselves. And notice, you see the traits of all of the people that rule the world, you see it's the same exact thing, right? Whether it's Elon Musk, Donald Trump, any of them, right? They all have that gene where they have no, they might portray a sense of empathy, but when you really look at what they've done in their life, they don't have empathy. What matters is the bottom line. What matters is their own personal gain, their own personal success. They'll cut you the fuck off. They'll kill you. They'll do anything they can in order to further their own agenda, their own shit, right? It's just a way darker energy, a way darker mindset than what the collectives or the masses have. And that's why I said, like, when people are in disbelief about these things, and hopefully it's not too echoey in here, I should have came in this room, but when people are in disbelief, they're like, oh no, they would never do us that way. They would never they would never genocide an entire population. They would never, fake a war. They would never fake a virus. They would never do these things. It's because you wouldn't do it, because you are an emotional, empathetic being. You're based on emotion. You're more a mammalian, right? But a reptilian is exploiting that, right? They're like, they know that that's your weakness. That's a difference between you and them, right? You have compassion. You have empathy. You are a social creature. Right? Notice that the hermit too, right? The hermit is a solo creature, right? And this is the essence of how you obtain knowledge, esoteric knowledge, right? Disconnecting, right? From and any mystical, magical, type of rite, initiation, story, epic, so on and so forth. It's always the hermit, the warrior, right? It's always one of these archetypes that lack compassion, right? That are about, the self, right? And they even teach us a lot now too. In a lot of the new age communities, it's, like, self-love and all of this, right? When really it's like, it's really teaching people to be selfish, and they're calling it spirituality, right? Like the way to true manifestation, and they always give you this woo-woo, airy-fairy bullshit, trying to gas you up on how you can manifest and how you can do this. But these are people that don't understand it either, They're just as lost in the sauce as you and I. And that's why the same stories too, and this, not only is the reality mirrored, but it's cyclical. So it's like that same story operates over and over and over, right? So nothing new under the sun. That's why all the world wars mimic each other, right? World War I was damn near the same as World War II. When you even see World War III, even though it's a social war, right, and psychological war, you still see that it kind of like goes along those same narratives, right? Because they're connecting to that energy. That's how this happens. When they make their sacrifices, when they connect consciously, when they're, they adopt archetypes like Elon Musk connecting to the Marduk archetype with, turning Twitter to X, PayPal being X, right? All of this with the X, right? The planet X, the crossing, right? Connecting to that energy, right? That way they can connect to that story, because once you can connect to the energy, that same story kind of is able to play out again. And I believe that these entities choose people, right? From these wealthy families, right? To, because it's that pyramidal structure, right? It rules from the top down, the top down. So if you have, president of the United States, you have the richest man in the world, you don't have to have, 10 million soldiers to beat 8 billion people. You just need one powerful person, and you can really conquer all the rest, right? And that's kind of see how you've seen it be played out the entire time. And it's like, and nobody wants to challenge that one with that almighty powerful status, right? Because they have all the tools, they have everything at their disposal in order to be able to put the masses into submission. And that's what you see too, right? And the two people I just mentioned, right? Trump and Musk and all that. Notice how they both represent that same kind of energy, right? And they both have come together now and join forces. And now you've seen this shift in energy and all the people kind of falling under the umbrella, right, of that regime, right, of that energy, because it's that same archetype, that same pattern, that same energy playing out over and over and over again. It just reinvents itself. It puts itself with a new face, a new place, new names, but the names always mean the same thing, right? The story is always the same, because there's nothing new under the sun, right? And we continue to fall for it because, we are under that veil of forgetfulness. We don't live long enough to remember the history. And it's like they're already wiping out the history from, 100, 200 years ago. So what makes you think that the history from 1,000 years ago is accurate? They're changing the history that happened a decade ago. What makes you think that the history from 2,000 years ago is accurate? It's like people really never consider that. They think that everything happens the way that they were told. No. The way you're being told is the way that it's intended for you to know. It's not the way that it actually happened. History goes to the victor. That's why it's his story, right? It's his story. The one who won, the one still alive. That's who tells the story. Then he can tell it any fucking way he wants. And if he wants you, and notice every time a civilization, a nation, anybody was conquered, what do? They destroy their gods. They knock down their statues, their idols, right? They erase their history, their heroes, all of it. Now, where does that come from? That's happened on a global scale more times than we can probably count. If we just look at geological data alone, there are a lot of different incarnations of humans, right? We came in a lot of different forms. So that makes you wonder how many times we've been wiped out, how many times it started over. Are we even the same humans that were around during the times of the pyramid? Do we even look the same? Right? There's no telling, what color our skin, what language we spoke, how tall, how short, right? If we had 5 digits or what, there's no telling what we were actually like at the times before. We have no clue other than what we're told, right? And who are we told by? We're told by what's allowed to be told, right? And notice that's why history, science, everything that we learn with modern knowledge, and it's even now, that's why we have fact checkers and fake news and all of this. This is just a new modern version of the same old shit, right? What is the allowed narrative of the day, right? Because it's what they want to be filtered through to go on for the next generation to learn as their history, right? So right now, and what's the one way that you can erase somebody completely? We're eternal when we create something that echoes through time, whether we make music, whether we make videos, we write books, right? It allows us our voice, our spirit to echo through time when we create things, because we are creators, right? We're the children of God. God's a creator, so are we. We create all the time through our thoughts, our words, our actions, everything. We're constantly creating. And what is the one way you can erase an entity? By wiping out what they created, right? You wipe out their words, you wipe out their images, you wipe out their thoughts, their ideas, you wipe it all out, and they never existed. Nothing they did ever existed. Everything they fought for never mattered. And that's what's happening to you and me today. That's what censorship is, right? They're censoring you to wipe you out. That way you don't exist in a future time. That way your thoughts don't exist in a future time. You know, and it may sound very nefarious, because it is. It is nefarious. You know, there's no two ways to go about it. You know, an agenda of totalitarianism and conquering people is nefarious, right? There's nothing, no matter how they paint it, and they always do, they always try to make it as if when they're bringing in, you know, surveillance states, police states, you know, all of these genocides, all of these things, war, they always try to paint it up as because that's how they exploit you, is through your emotions, right? So they always paint it as some type of, you know, noble cause, right? We're liberating the people of Iraq. Remember that? Operation Iraqi Freedom, right? Did it seem like they got freedom? They didn't get freedom, right? What was the first thing the United States did after they blew that whole place off the map? They went there and they ransacked all of the libraries, all of the museums. They took all of the Sumerian shit, right? Why? Why? Because history goes to the victors, right? If you control the history, you control the narrative, right? That's you're wrapped in your ancestors, right? You have your lineage wrapped around you, your genetic memory, all of it. You know, that's what, think about the Library of Alexandria. It was burned down too. The same thing. You know, the internet is the modern day Library of Alexandria, and what are they doing with it now? You know, they're essentially burning it to the ground through censorship, cancel culture, and all of these things, right? Because they don't want 2 generations from now, people to be able to go back and see what actually happened. People to be able to go back and see what was actually exposed. You know, the only thing that's really allowed to flourish is the things that keep you in darkness and confusion. You know, that's why most of the more prominent channels and more prominent people online now are stupid and full of shit, you know. And you can call them shills or whatever. Most shills are not shills, honestly, intentionally. They don't even know they're shilling. They're just that disconnected. Like they have no clue, you know. They have no clue they're doing the deed of darkness. Like they have no clue they're bringing down, you know, more darkness on the collective consciousness. They don't know, you know. And if you're exploiting a species emotionally, right? Fear, anger, right? All the negative emotions would be how you keep us in disarray. That's why trauma-based mind control is so effective. Think about it. It's trauma. It's based in fear. It's based in pain. It's based that whenever you get, you know, in your emotional side, that's when the logical side of your brain cuts off. You can no longer think logically and irrationally. Now think about population. Everybody, think about it. If you have an internet and algorithms that are now designed to operate as an echo chamber, right? They're all echo chambers to reinforce your dumb fucking ideas back to you over and over and over again, right? That way you believe them so fucking powerfully, you can't even take somebody disagreeing it. You don't have the ability, right? You don't have the mental acuity to be able to actually have like a discourse and, you know, have some form of debate and think about it logically because you're so emotionally connected to it. The moment someone says Jesus isn't real, the moment someone says Trump is a piece of shit, the moment someone says you're a lefty libtard, the moment someone says any of these other derogatory terms to your ideologies, you get fucked up. You can't even think anymore. Your water starts to rise, you start to boil, and all of a sudden that logic kicks off. Right? It kicks off. You're no longer thinking straight. You're just mad. You're just mad. You're like, fuck them. You're no longer hearing what they say. You know? This happens for a reason. This is why symbolism is so prominent, you know, in television, Music operates on certain frequencies because it's a form of hypnotism. And it's like, think about it. Like everything in secular and popular culture is basically today is, a form of, dumbing down. How much music can you listen to now that, tells you to go do drugs, violence, sex, sexual promiscuity, right? Basically have no morals, no values, no nothing, right? Right? No self-respect, no nothing, no dignity, no nothing, right? It's hypnotizing, it's brainwashing, and you're repeating it. It's becoming your mantra of your life, right? You're singing it, you're in the car vibing to it because like this is becoming your life's mantra, You're chanting this. You're speaking that spell. That's what words are, right? When we understand, we stand under the spelling of the word, That's how much power they have. So when we're speaking these mantras and we're watching on television, think about television and all of the programming that we're seeing too. Everything. It happens we see it before it happens. Why is that? It's because we collectively manifest the fucking shit. It's not because they're so powerful they're showing it to you before they do it. It's not true. Whoever told you that, it's not true. A lot of people do say that, though. A lot of people, content creators are like, they have to tell you before they do it. No, they don't. No, they don't. In witchcraft, yes, you will tell somebody something, but it's to get them to go along with it and do it on their own free will. But because you don't want to, and that's if you care about the karma or even believe in the shit to start with. Most of them do not. But when they're telling you before it happens, it's because you're manifesting it. That's why when we see something happen on The Simpsons and it happens later in life, it ain't because the Simpsons are predicting everything. It's because we are creating everything. That's why. And people don't think about that. And the saying of you are what you eat, right? So if you eat garbage food, you become fat. Well, think about what you're ingesting. Mentally, consciously, you're watching nothing but, I don't know how many women I've met in my life that watch fucking murder documentaries. It's mind blowing. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like you want to be preyed on, because you're manifesting that. You're connecting to that energy, I'm a person that likes science fiction, I love it. I love watching the movies and everything. And in almost every one of the sci-fi movies, it's some dystopian future where humanity is fucking enslaved. We're in some surveillance police state and AI controls everything. And it's like, look at the reality. Is it because they told us first, or is it because we've all watched that, connected to that, and now we're creating that? I believe it's the latter. I believe it's the latter. And I believe that's why it's been so important for them to erase all of our history. That's why it's so important for us to not understand where we come from. That's why, you see the Great Flood happen, right? Where everything was fucking wiped out, where everything was changed. Was mankind, and you have to really ask yourself this, was mankind even in a physical, were we really even a physical being, before all this? Were we? We'll never know, but honestly, I don't think so. I think that's part of Planet X, the splitting of everything into the crossing, right? Splitting the planet into binary code, masculine, feminine, right? Left and right brain, right? Spiritual, physical, right? And even the separation of the firmament, right? The firmament, the waters above, the waters below. The skies opened up and let the waters above come in, right? At one point in time, it said there was no sky. It's like we were split into as a species. Not just the earth, us. Becoming half the being that we once were. Having half the abilities that we once did, half the intelligence, half the spiritual aptitude, half, maybe even less, And you can almost see in some of the mythologies too, where it kind of like like it kind of insinuates that too, like Prometheus when he tricks I believe Zeus, right? He brings the bull down, which is Taurus, right? Or Marduk, right? And he puts it in two piles, right? There was one small pile and one big pile. And he told one pile, the gods got to choose one pile and man got to choose another, right? And the gods chose the biggest pile, and the biggest pile was garbage, right? And the small pile went to mankind, and mankind had all the good stuff in it. Well, because Prometheus, the light bearer, Lucifer, gave all of the good stuff to humans, that's when Zeus punished him, and that's where, he's on the cross, right? And he has the vultures that come and eat his liver, which is what regenerates, right? Think back to the telomeres at the beginning of all this, right? And every day it devours his liver and comes back and does it all over again, and I believe it's actually, we are Prometheus is what I believe. I believe we are Lucifer, the fallen angel. It's the intellect, right? It's the intellect. Because notice Lucifer was also the angel of sound or music, and we are trapped in sound, and we use sound to communicate as well, and it was a third of the angels that fell, third of the stars, whatever, right? Like you can kind of see all the similarities there, and how it was the most powerful, most beautiful angel. He was a seraphim and a cherubim, right? He was the highest ranking angel, the most loved angel. It's us. That's who it is. And then think about how it regenerates. So it's like talking about every cycle, right? Like the liver represents like those telomeres, right? The eternal life regenerating. How the vultures representing these dark archons, right? Or these entities, these spirits devouring us, picking us apart, eating our energy, right? In every cycle, we regenerate over and over and over and over again. Why? For the divine knowledge, for the spark, right? That divine spark, that God spark. It kind of changes your perspective when you see it this way. You're like, holy shit, like, maybe what we were taught was wrong and what was bad is not wrong and bad. And maybe what we were taught was good is not good, And like, that's why you hear, like anybody who worships or obeys God fears God. It's like, why would you have to fear your heavenly Father? Why would you have to fear, the one that created you? It's like, did he make you just to be a slave? I mean, if he made you just to be a slave, then I can understand fearing him, right? Like, I'm afraid because if I don't do what he says, he'll fuck me up, right? That's why I fear somebody, right? And think about the story of these gods, right? They wanted to be feared. They wanted to be worshipped. No gods before me, right? Meaning, and if you're a god, right? And what did Christ say? Didn't I say that ye are gods? If you were made in the image of the Elohim, which means sons of God, supreme magistrates, right? Then you are a god. You are an angel. You are a son of God, right? Just saying. No gods before me, meaning don't put yourself before me. Right? Don't put yourself before me. Don't worship false idols. What is an idol? It's the physical self. Right? Don't give reverence to this. Don't give reverence to you. Give it to me. It kind of like changes the whole way you look at things. You're like, holy shit. They were ingraining your slavery in every word. Every word. It was like engineering you to be a good little slave, to not think for yourself. That's why religion and state, and they say that there's a separation between it, but there is not. Not at all, right? If you need to get married, what do you have to get? A marriage license. If you want to get divorced, what do you got to get? You got to file divorce, right? It's still joined at the fucking hip. And what is the state? It's government, right? Govern, lord, control, mental mentality, your fucking mind. Why? Because perception is reality, and we create our reality from our mind, right? And remember, Lucifer is the intellect, the mind, the fallen mind, the fallen intellect, right? And Satan is the shadow aspect of Lucifer, right? So that's the physical. That's 666. He who hath understanding, let him calculate the number, for it's a number of a man, right? It's the shadow aspect. It's the lower phantom aspect, the idol, the god of this world, right? 666, 60 seconds, 60 minutes, 2 plus 4, 24 hours, 6. 666. It's time, in the construct of time, right? The Masonic cube of Saturn, 1 plus 5, 1 plus 5, 1 plus 5, 666. The hexagon, the X, the cross, right? The cross is the cube, busted open, the box, the cube, it's all the same shit, right? When you start to understand this, you're like, holy shit. And you look at them, all of them in Mecca as they're going around like obedient little sheep, right? Around that cube. They're orbiting around that cube, right? The cube, the black box of the mind that controls language. It's like, what the fuck is going on here? We literally live in a fucked up dream, is what it actually seems like. You know, a fucked up dream, a nightmare, if you will. You know, and it's like one you can't wake from. That's why if you look at and some people can say it's fake. I don't care if you think it's fake or not. I think it does derive from real knowledge. The Emerald Tablets of Thoth, he talks about that basically the only escape from this reality is astral projection, right? That's the only way to ascend and travel the stars. Why is that? Because it's literally projecting your spirit out of the body. And how do you get into that state, that hypnagogic dream state, right? You do that by going into a dream state while awake. Right? That astral, and remember, Neptune and Uranus ruling the astral outside of the bounds of Saturn, right? The Saturn matrix, right? So that dream world, the astral world, is where we actually probably originate. And if you remember all of the Greek epics and shit like that, where they talk about the primordial entities, it was Gaia and Uranus, I believe, that actually cohabited or commingled to make the original gods, the Olympians and all of this. So it's like, and that was water and earth, right? Once again, take it back to the Sumerians, Ea, Lord of the water, then he became Enki, Lord of the earth. See, there's nothing new under the sun. All the tales are the same, And those gods that did conquer us, think about, are you being told, and listen, this is what will blow your fucking nugget here. When it talks about how the Titans, or the primordial entities that once existed, were defeated by the Olympians, right? These wars in the heavens and shit. What if we were the Titans, were the primordial entities, and they were defeating us? We were the old gods that in the Necronomicon, it says not even to mention their names, right? You can't even mention the names of the old gods. That's how evil and bad it is, which is all about Marduk in the Book of the Dead, by the way, the Necronomicon. I've done videos on it. If you want to join the Patreon, you'll be able to see those. But it's like, why can't we even mention their names? Are they that bad? Or are they afraid that we might resurrect that energy somehow? I'm just saying, what if we are being told the story of our own defeat? What if we were disembodied? What if we were one giant collective energy? And I know it's kind of out there for a lot of people to even think of, but I'm just saying, think of it. Just consider that maybe, and if you've learned anything, anybody that does any sort of seeking or anything like that, I think one thing that is apparent is that anything is possible. Anything is possible. I mean, 100 years ago, they couldn't have imagined that we'd be walking around with fucking smart devices and AI and quantum computers, and think about the quantum computers and all that. It looks like ancient technology was quantum computational as well, right? They couldn't even imagine that. So, things that you find hard to imagine or believe today, in 100 years from now may not seem too crazy. So I'm just asking people to consider something different than what they've been taught. Maybe consider that you are more than you've ever imagined you could be, or more than you ever thought possible. And that the reason everything in reality is engineered for your subservience, right? In your ignorance, and for you to just go along with it is because we've already been conquered. The reason you'll never get disclosure is because we've already been conquered. The reason everything seems so alien on Earth and counterintuitive to our growth, to our health, right? The poisoning of the water, the air, right? All of it. Just think about it. The poisoning of our minds, our emotions, our bodies, the whole fucking thing. It seems so alien, don't it? It's because maybe, just maybe, all of those gods that we've been taught about were real. We at one point in time were able to communicate and understand, but since our conquering, since our altering, since all of that, since the firmament and the whole thing we've been taught, before our history was erased, before our powers were erased, all of it, they arrived and they conquered us. And it's already happened. The ETs are already here. They've already been here. And there's nothing natural about our reality. There's nothing even real about our reality. You, in fact, live in an illusion of confusion that is being used to siphon, all of your life force. So just consider it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. I do want to thank everybody for joining me. Please hit the thumbs up if you're watching in the chat. If you like what you hear, you like the content, donate, support to the channel. PayPal.me, the Best Damn Podcast. Cash App, Best Damn Podcast. Join me on Patreon, get private content. Patreon.com, Best Damn Podcast Official, or Facebook.com, John Keane, Best Damn Podcast. You can also follow me, Instagram, Facebook, Best Damn Podcast, Twitter, The Real Best Damn. Check out the backup channels, all that good stuff too. All the links are in the description. You guys leave some comments and all that good stuff. I want to thank you all for joining me. Love y'all and consider it. I'll see you next time. Peace.